You showed up late to a dinner party in Germany, and your host hasn't spoken to you properly since. You gave your new Japanese coworker a gift wrapped in white paper, and they looked genuinely uncomfortable. You told your British neighbor you'd pop by sometime, and they seemed horrified. None of these people are overreacting. You just broke an unwritten rule you never knew existed. And in each of those countries, reputation damage from moments like these can take years to repair. Here is the uncomfortable truth about moving abroad. Nobody hands you the manual. You learn the language, you study the history, maybe you even try the local food before you arrive. But the invisible social code, the stuff that determines whether locals actually accept you or quietly write you off, that part lives nowhere in any guidebook. And that gap is exactly what destroys otherwise perfectly good expatriate experiences before they even really begin. Today, we are going through the cultural landmines that catch newcomers off guard the most, region by region, habit by habit. And more importantly, we are talking about why these things matter so deeply to locals. Because understanding the why is what actually changes your behavior long term. Let us start with something that feels completely harmless, but carries enormous weight in several East Asian cultures. The business card. In Japan, South Korea, and parts of China, the way you handle someone's card tells them everything about how you value them as a person. Westerners will often grab a card, glance at it for half a second, and shove it in their back pocket. In Japan, that is essentially the equivalent of someone handing you their resume and watching you use it as a coaster. You receive a card with both hands, you study it briefly and genuinely, you place it carefully on the table in front of you during your meeting, and you never, ever write on it. The card is an extension of the person. Treat it accordingly. Now, let us talk about something that trips up almost every English speaker moving to the United Kingdom. You think you speak the language, so you assume you understand the culture. You do not. British communication is layered in understatement and indirectness in a way that genuinely confuses people from more direct communication cultures. When a British person says something is quite interesting, they may mean it is bizarre and off-putting. When they say they will think about it, the answer is probably no. When they invite you to pop by anytime, they genuinely do not mean anytime. That is a social nicety, not a literal invitation. Showing up unannounced is considered deeply rude. The key adaptation here is to slow down your assumptions and recognize that yes often means maybe, and maybe rarely means yes. Moving to Germany or the Netherlands or Scandinavia brings its own set of adjustments. Punctuality in these cultures is not just polite. It is a form of respect and a signal of your character. Arriving 15 minutes late to a meeting in Germany is not a minor inconvenience. It communicates that your time is more valuable than theirs, which is an insult delivered without words. And in professional contexts especially, that impression sticks. If you come from a culture where showing up a little late is socially normal or even fashionable, you will need to rewire that habit quickly. The opposite challenge awaits you in many Mediterranean, Latin American, and Middle Eastern cultures, where rigid timekeeping can actually make you seem cold or transactional. In these social environments, spending time with someone is the point. Rushing through a meal, checking your watch, or leaving early signals that you have more important things to do than be present with the people around you. Relationships are built slowly through repeated shared time, and cutting that short damages trust in ways that are hard to rebuild. Let us get into physical gestures, because this is where things get genuinely complicated. The thumbs up sign, entirely normal and positive in most Western countries, is deeply offensive in parts of the Middle East and West Africa. The OK symbol made with your fingers carries obscene connotations in Brazil and Turkey. Pointing at someone with your index finger is considered rude across much of Asia, the Middle East, and parts of Africa. If you need to indicate a direction or draw someone's attention to something, an open hand is almost always the safer option globally. And never pat someone on the head, even a child, in Thailand or many Southeast Asian countries. The head is considered the most spiritually significant part of the body. It is not a casual interaction zone. Food and eating customs are another massive category. In many Middle Eastern and South Asian households, accepting food when it is offered is not optional. It is expected. Refusing food can be interpreted as distrust or disrespect toward your host. In contrast, finishing every single bite of food in China or Japan can signal to your host that you were not given enough, which puts them in an uncomfortable position. Leaving a small amount on your plate communicates satisfaction. In Ethiopia, being fed directly from someone else's hand is a gesture of friendship and acceptance, and refusing it in that context is a genuine social rebuff. Religious and spiritual spaces carry their own layer of requirements that visitors often underestimate. In many mosques, temples, and shrines across Asia and the Middle East, you are expected to remove your shoes before entering. This is not optional, and it is not a suggestion. Dressing modestly is similarly non-negotiable in many of these spaces, regardless of the local temperature. Covering your shoulders and knees at minimum is a baseline expectation. What feels like a fashion restriction to you is actually a question of basic respect within a sacred context. Numbers and colors carry cultural significance that is invisible to outsiders. In many East Asian cultures, the number 4 sounds like the word for death in the local language, so gifting 4 of anything, or even putting things in groups of 4, carries an uncomfortable connotation. White is the color of mourning across large parts of Asia, which means a beautiful white floral arrangement for a housewarming could land as a very dark message. Red in China, however, signals luck and celebration, so it is a wonderful gift wrapping choice. Context matters enormously, and the gap between what something means to you and what it means to locals is exactly where most cultural damage happens. Here is the psychological reality underneath all of this. When you violate a cultural norm, even accidentally, locals do not usually see it as ignorance. They see it through the lens of their own experience, which tells them that outsiders often do not try hard enough to understand local customs. Your faux pas does not exist in a vacuum. It gets filtered through a long history of that community's relationship with outsiders. That is why the same mistake that gets laughed off in one place creates lasting damage in another. The stakes are not uniform. The single most protective thing you can do when building a new life somewhere is to approach locals as your teachers rather than simply your neighbors or colleagues. Ask genuine questions. Apologize specifically when you get it wrong rather than with a generic sorry. Show that you noticed. Show that it matters to you. That kind of responsiveness signals something powerful. It tells people that you are not just tolerating their culture until you can recreate your home country in miniature. You are actually here. You are paying attention. You are willing to change. The people who build genuine belonging in a new country are almost never the ones who arrived knowing everything. They are the ones who stayed curious long enough to learn the things that cannot be Googled. Your reputation in a new place is not built on your job title or your language skills. It is built in 1,000 small moments of whether you showed respect for how things are done here. Start paying attention to those moments now. The adjustment is worth every awkward lesson along the way.